Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Space, and thank you for joining us for today's event, Indigenous Research Center's Annual Research Symposium. We are streaming to YouTube, live from Space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And we'd like to extend our gratitude to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, who are the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. We respect the continuing connections with the past, present, and future of all Indigenous peoples and nations who have and continue to make these lands and waters their homes. Here at Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities that examine research questions and projects, things happening here at the university. We're also running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting, and we welcome comments and questions there via the chat. And those of you here in the space, if you have comments and questions, raise your hand and we'll get a microphone over to you so that everyone can hear. Okay, it's now my pleasure for our first panel, Indigenous Art Histories, More Fluff Than Feathers. So welcome, Dr. Michelle McGeough, Assistant Professor in Art History. Michelle, welcome.
Tansei, Michelle McGeough, Nasigasan, Namaskawaskaskigan. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and chairing this first panel. It is often a really wonderful reminder when we have the symposium of the types of work and research that is taking place here at Concordia, and in particular, the emerging scholars that are enrolled in the different programs across the university. When I was putting this panel together, the title of this panel actually comes from a very important Kanien'kehá:ka scholar, Deborah Dockstetter, and in particular, an exhibition and a text that she wrote regarding More Than Fluff and Feathers, and talking about Indigenous art histories in this way. And being a Métis person, of course, I'm really interested in genealogies. So for me to actually be here in the territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation and to actually have this opportunity to re-engage some of the discussions and ideas that Deborah Dockstetter had put forward as a scholar. She's a very important scholar that many contemporary Indigenous art histories art historians refer to, as well as curators in their work. But it allows us to think about art history, in particular Indigenous art histories, beyond what we see as being presented. And in particular, the deep meaning and the visual language that is embodied in the art of Indigenous artists. So today, what we have a panel here of three emerging scholars. Some are Rodrigo, who is an art historian, Victoria, who is also in many ways an art historian, but also an practicing artist, and Dayna Danger, who is joining us on the stream. And each one of them is going to be talking about their practice and their research. And in particular, thinking about it in terms of what it means to be an Indigenous or a BIPOC scholar, and the types of information and research that they are doing. The other thing that's really important is that as we're going through, Rodrigo is going to go first, then Dayna is going to join us, and then Victoria will be doing the presentation. I'm going to have each of the presenters introduce themselves and do their own acknowledgement in terms of territory and positionality. So Rodrigo.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I am really glad to be here. I always feel really welcomed in this symposium, so that's why I'm always here. I'm always back, and it's a pleasure to be alongside all of you. I am Brazilian. I am a practice artist as well. I have my own background in visual arts, but nowadays I am more in the theoretical realm since 2020, when I began my PhD in art history here at Concordia. But I have always navigated kind of like floating around different cultural realms. and I have always dreamed a lot, and my dreams inform a lot of my practice. Last night I dreamed with my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, so my grandmother Jurema, which is an Afro-Indigenous name of Brazil, and this is my relation to this spectrum that comes from my grandmother Jurema, and the religion of Umbanda in Brazil, which is a syncretic religion that was a way of Afro and indigenous spiritualities to resist in Brazil, kind of like hidden by Catholicism and a mix of different iconographies. So I am deeply informed by syncretism and this merge of different systems of beliefs. Yeah, I feel like that's my introduction for now. That's what was manifested for today. And should I begin the presentation, or you are introducing?
Actually, we could have each person introduce themselves. So Dayna, if you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. My name is Dayna Danger. I use they, them pronouns. I am a member of the Manitoba Métis Federation. And I've been in so-called Montreal or Tiohtià:ke now since 2012. I'm doing my PhD research right now. And you know, honestly, art brought me out to the East. I'm from the West. I grew up in, you know, so-called Winnipeg. And so definitely a big culture shock here, and continues to be. It's very different than growing up in Winnipeg. But at the same time, it's really afforded me the ability to make community, especially out here in Tiohtià:ke, and just like looking at the different politics and then how it informs myself and what I bring home back out West. I'm a visual artist. I mostly do photography. I do sculpture. I bead. I make performance. I do installation, a whole bunch of fun stuff. And also, I'm one of the members of the Buckskin Babes High Tanning Collective, which started in 2021. And that I'm going to talk more about that after, but it's very interesting that you had brought up your grandmother, because literally I'm going to show a video of my great grandmother. So the grandmas are in the house, you know, and such an important, it really is such an important thing to, not a thing, but just like the acknowledgement, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this research if it wasn't for my great grandmother. So really excited to share today, and to share and to hear everybody else's work. And yeah, looking forward to it. Miigwech.
Tansa Kiawao, Dishinakashun, Victoria May, Dushchin, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6, Niwikin Tiohtià:ke, Lima Tifnia, Mafami Shinakashun, Vermet P. Delorme. Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria May. I am a dancer and a PhD student here at Concordia. My family, my mother's family, were from the Road Allowance settlement just outside Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, on Treaty 6 territory, and my dad was a settler. I've been in Tiohtià:ke now for 16 years as an uninvited Indigenous or Métis McGeough dancer. My family names are Vermet and Delorme, and I'm really excited to be here. I've been a dancer since I could walk. I started in ballet, moved into contemporary dance in my 20s, and my career's taken me to Winnipeg and to Europe, Copenhagen, Sweden, and I landed here in Tiohtià:ke in 2007. Today, I'm going to speak about a project that emerged from the initial stages of my research as a PhD student. It's community-based, and I felt like I had the opportunity to realize the project rather than, not to just study it, but to study it, rather than trying to like research and build at the same time. I had the opportunity to come together with some other folks to build a project, but that really, the initial stages and the seeds were from my application to come here to Concordia as a student, and I'm really grateful to share, and so glad to be here with everybody.
Should I begin then? So I will begin my presentation. Thank you everyone for all the introductions. I will share a little bit of my ongoing PhD research that focus mainly on Tupinambá legacies. The Tupinambá people were the main civilization in Brazil prior to the colonization process. I always do a little bit of introduction and contextualization of how these indigenous people were portrayed throughout history by colonizers. And as I know that many people are not aware of Brazilian history and Brazilian art history, I just brought these images of the geographical part of a portion where these people occupied. And so mainly they were in the coast of Brazil, what we call nowadays as Brazil. Back then, these different nations that would be actually divided in two big groups called Tupi and Tapuia. And also they had their own names in between the communities, but they were mainly divided by these two nations. They called this portion of the territory as Pindorama. And prior to the colonial project, they had a population estimated around 1.5 to 2.4 million people. And it's important to acknowledge that Tupi is an umbrella term or a macro ethnonym used to homogenize these nations, these different nations. And I still use this term as part of an ongoing process of indigenous studies to also think about the dialogues that are possible because they shared many similarities in terms of ceremonial traditions involving dancing, adornments, sound movement. And nowadays they also use this term or Tupinambá as a common denomination, as a communal identifier to share their struggles as well. As it's common in oppressed identities, we often embrace some terminologies to be able to thrive together. So that's why I am still engaging with this terminology. And they were semi-nomadic and agricultural societies, and they were known throughout early modern history because of their anthropophagic rituals that were depicted in a cannibalistic way. Nowadays, we also challenge a lot this type of depiction and stereotypes. Théodore de Brie, for example, this artist that portrayed this illustration never left Europe. So there are a lot of it's not like as accurate. And the Tupinambá people of today, they also question a lot. And what they say is that this type of ceremonies, they would happen in a time of general war in the world. And this was their way inside of their cosmovisions and cosmologies to respect the enemies. So they actually would keep the enemies for 7 years. They would introduce them as part of their communities. And then it was kind of like a trial. And after the 7 years, if they proved that they were good citizens, let's say for their community, they would stay, they would not be killed. So it was actually a way of keeping a sense of justice in their own cosmovisions and cosmologies. I will not go deep in that, but because my focus is actually their practices of feather work, especially the Tupinambá mantles or assojabas. So assojabas are these magnificent mantles or cloaks. We still have 11 of these clocks preserved in European collections. One of them was repatriated last year. It was the first case of featherwork, indigenous featherwork object or artifact repatriated in history. So it was a really big moment for Brazilian indigenous communities. And the Tupinambá believe that these mantles have agency and they are ancestors themselves, and they need to be displayed in a certain way. They need to always to be vertical like that. This one actually that we are seeing on the left was the one that was repatriated, that used to be in the National Museum of Copenhagen. And they were done with the gererê technique, which is a fishing net technique that was reactivated by Glicéria Tupinambá, which is this indigenous leader from the Tupinambá community of Serra do Padeiro, which is in the state of Bahia, in the northeast coast of Brazil. So she has been a huge presence in many indigenous movements in Brazil nowadays, and she uses art as a platform for her to talk about her community struggle, and she has been doing since 2006. Sorry, many researchers in collections in Europe to reactivate these practices, to analyze these ancient clocks and remanifest them in contemporary times. So just to also give a context of the ancient assojabas or Tupinambá mantles, they used to have colors and patterns that would reflect social values, spirituality, and nature. And we can say that they had a sort of color symbolism aspects to them, because their palette reflected a specific sense of kinships with nature, and they were also a way to enact entities. So assojaba in the Tupinambá cosmovisions are also entities themselves. They're also called assojaba. And there was during these rituals that usually were related to life, death, they believed that they would become birds themselves. So which was a process of symbolic transformation of their bodies, kind of like a mediumistic channel through the assojabas. And the assojabas themselves were really complex artifacts and ancestors, because they were done through an alchemical process that was called tapirage, in which they used acids coming from tropical frogs to change the colors of the feathers. And they would reintroduce these feathers in the birds, and then they would grow up again in different colors. So it was a really complex technique that was done in order to achieve the color symbolism of these entities. And as you can see in this drawing from an Italian codex, they used to have a palette that was around the colors of fire. This had a motif that there was a reason, because they would actually reproduce the color palette of the bonfires, because these ceremonies would always happen around the bonfires, as we can see as well here in this engraving. And so the assojabas, the ancient ones, always had either red, orange, yellow, and some parts of blue and green feathers. And nowadays, my research is not only contextualizing this trajectory of the assojabas, the ancient ones, and how they are being negotiated with European collections, but also how Glicéria Tupinambá, this Tupinambá leader from Serra do Padeiro, is doing a revisionist approach to the very practice of feather work in the Tupinambá people history. Here on the left, we can see one of the illustrations that she found from the 17th century that portrays a woman wearing a green assojaba in ancient times. So she's actually questioning if all of the assojabas from the past were red and orange and were around the bonfire colors, but she argues that actually there's like way more complex nuances that we need to study further to understand their roles. And nowadays she's producing new assojabas as she reenacted the gererê technique. As we can see here in these pictures, it's always her wearing the new assojabas with different palettes. that incorporate different color symbolisms related to the color of trees, which also resonates with their original mythologies, because the ancient Tupinamba people believed that we were born out of trees. So for her, it's important to recreate asojabas that also resonate their ancient mythologies. But she's also expanding them to different elements of nature and doing the feather work with feathered pieces that she can find in their territories nowadays, right? Like, so it's more ground aviary matter now than flying birds, as it used to be in the past with ibis birds, for example. That was the main bird used, and parrots and macaw birds. Now she's using more chickens, gooses, ducks, but also for the new ones that she's producing, she's also using the different birds, because they believe that as the asojabas are getting back to the territory, other animals that were getting extinct are also getting back. And this is actually happening. She also is revisioning the history of women in the Tupinamba legacies, how women were actually fundamental in forms of governance in the Tupinamba societies. And this was erased by the traditional official colonial history that would portray women always as submissive and naked bodies. And then she shows how actually there are some, like, even though the majority of depictions that we can find nowadays were made by colonizers, we still can find some depictions of women in positions of power. As we can see here on the left, we have this illustration portraying Pusanga Igara, which would be a main leader of the tribes that would have medicine roles. She would be like an important healer and also a leader in spiritual ceremonies. So this is associated with different types of governance, because the ancient Tupinamba people, they would be divided in self-governance and high governance. The self-governance pertains to the internal dynamics and ways of life within the Tupinamba communities, while higher government involves the external negotiations and alliances formed with others. So the whole process of reactivating these practices also revolve around women. Here in the center we have Amotara, which was a really important Tupinamba leader that unfortunately already passed away, but she was the first one that tried to recreate the asojabas, and she is recognized as the one that created the first prototype in contemporary times. Here she's facing the same asojaba that was repatriated nowadays when it visited Brazil in 2000 in a really polemic exhibition that I don't have the time to go in details here. And we also have this depiction of a Tupinamba woman, even though she has European features, which was also really common in this type of painting from colonial times. But she's in a really powerful position, and she's an allegory of America in the Apollo room in the Versailles Palace. And Glyceria Tupinamba argues how this was not something random, like the presence of this woman in a leadership position in this really important place in Europe. And I will talk, I know that I am probably achieving my time, so I am almost there, so this is the last slide. Another thing that I'm investigating is how there were gender roles and sexual pluralities also in ancient times in the Tupinamba communities. Regarding the feather work itself and how they would wear the feather work, the men generally wore plumage pieces so that the cotton thread crossed the torso transversely, as we can see here in this picture on the left, from the neck to the back where the plumage hanged. There are many depictions of ceremonies where the men were actually wearing the asojabas this way, not like a cape, but hanging in their backs. while the cloak worn like a cape is more present in the images of female spiritual leaders and spiritual healers, Posangaguaras, and in the images of male shamans, pajés, and chiefs, caciques. So it's really interesting because in all the depictions that I have been investigating, when women are wearing these assojabas, they are always in powerful roles of leadership or healing roles. While men, sometimes they are performing not as the leaders, and in this case, they would have the capes hanging. And we also have the cases of tibiras. The tibiras, as we can see here on the right, this image actually is not from a tibira originally, but it became known, but it became known as a tibira. I'm also studying this iconography, like how it became a signifier of tibiras. So tibiras were the nomenclature, used to address plural sexualities in their communities. So usually like non-binary, what we call non-binary or two spirits to get closer to North American inquirers, but they would call tibiras, like non-binary, gay or transsexual identities, as we know in the Western societies nowadays, would be tibiras. So I'm also investigating their roles in these societies. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's just a fascinating topic in terms of thinking about, looking at the ways that we are utilizing these older documents and coming back to them and revisiting them and having people from community actually giving us a better understanding of what we are witnessing, as opposed to, the idea of a European, artist coming in, basing, their drawings on reading accounts rather than actually being there and placing their interpretations onto these images, kind of thing. So very important in terms of that, but it's also a really good segue into Dayna, and in particular Dayna's research and this notion of revitalization and bringing back these practices in different ways.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes. Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna get this going because we're getting short on time. But my name is Dayna Danger. This is like the last kind of project that I worked on, which is called Kinship Masks, where I beaded fetish masks for Indigenous queer kin that were close to me, and then I gifted them these belongings, I call them, because I wanted to push back against the idea of the things that we make as being artifacts or objects. I wanted them to belong to somebody, and so that's why I used, they belong to somebody. They're meant to be on skin. They're meant to be worn. So I really wanted that to be a big focal point in the whole thing that I have done, and really talks about ownership of like when we make art, who actually owns the image, like who benefits from it, and really looking at those power dynamics. And why isn't it going? Oh, yeah, it was just lagging a little bit. And just to kind of show like how the series itself is changing. So that's why I say I'm a photographer and a sculptor, is because I made these masks, I set up the set, I did the photography, kind of like all of those aspects there to make these kind of series come to life. And so, the masks were kind of like this gateway into hide tanning. And what you see here is a photo of Janine Frey-Najutlit wearing a mask that I made for them in 2019 when we had a group show together at Modern Fuel called, I think it's called Chases and Tacks, which is kind of talking about when you're beading, how you kind of like lay beads down and then tacking, you have another kind of string coming up from behind and tacking everything down. So kind of speaking to the 2 needle techniques that we use to make some of this. Not everybody does, but I do. And so we were just thinking about that, and often with 2 people together, working together. But around this time that I had finished my master's, or my graduate degree with this work, and it kind of just naturally, I don't know, not naturally, but I was bit by the hide tanning bug. And so I'm going to quickly just show a video of why I was bit by the hide tanning bug. And I blame it all on my great granny, which is like not a bad thing to, So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video.
Dogs quite a ways from there, tie them to a tree, and then he'd take them out after he killed that moose, and then he'd bleed it. You have to take the blood, I think that's what he said. You have to bleed it. And then he'd put cut it apart, the legs.
Oh, wow.
Cut it. First of all, he'd cut the hide off, take the hide off. He'd take the hide off the moose, and then he'd put the meat and that in the toboggan.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring the moose hide to Mum. Then he made a frame, a great big frame, the size of the hide, and it had strings on it that make holes all around it, and then they tie it like this way. Tie it all around tight, so Mum could take the hide, the hair off of it, Mm-hmm. And what she used was, Dad would take the bone leg of a moose and made I can't remember the name of that thing, but he cut the little teeth on the end of that thing, and then he'd put a strap on it so Mum can hold it and go like that and take the hair off. It's a bone thing that he did off a moose, and take the hair off. Before she take the hair off, us kids used to play and slide on it. Just have lots of fun because it's quite a big frame. And we'd slide on. Mum would get after us. She said, "Don't play on there. There's a lot of Lisa guy in there." That's wood ticks that she named. I think that's French word. That's not native word. No, it's a kind of French word. Lisa guy. That's a wood ticks. And then she take the hair all off of it and leave it dry for a while. It's kind of wet and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and everything on.
So I don't want to give it all away, because literally this was like one of the first conversations that me and my great grandmother had as I started to go back and visit at home more. And I asked her permission, like, hey, do you want to answer some questions for me about some of the things I'm thinking about? And this is like at the beginning of my hide tanning journey, because I knew I wanted to be able to make my own leather. I was really thinking about where things come from, this, especially like with the beads, like when you think about beads, they came over from Europe from many different places, whether it was Italy or Czech Republic, et cetera, et cetera. And that sort of embellishment that was used, and just like thinking about those sort of things about how everything comes together. And mind you, the video that you're watching, she's recalling all of this stuff from when she was 7 years old. And so her memory is insane. She's probably like I think she's like 90 something, early 90s at this point. Because my great grandmother passed away, not this fall, but the fall before, at 100, and she was about to celebrate her 101 birthday coming up. So, and it was still sharp as a whip, or whatever the phrase is, but she was really very, very cognizant, very with it, and was almost able to time travel. So I have a lot of, so whenever, studying out here, I'm really away from like my ceremonies, like the people that I know, the language. And so it was really important for me to be able to go back home and really spend time with my family. Especially because my grandmother passed away when I was like 20 something. So there was a gap there of like the courage that I needed to be able to talk to them about these things, because of just, like, I'm not going to go into that whole history of why we weren't talking about this stuff. But ultimately it felt like at this point in my life, it's like shit or get off the pot, like I really have to do this because I just really want to talk to her. And it was not because of that. I just was visiting her, and then she told me this story like without cameras or anything. And then I was like, hey, Grandma, can I, ask you more questions about this and film it, because we have a lot of cousins, and some of them don't live in Manitoba too, and they didn't get to spend as much time with her as I've been able to, also because I've grown up with her and everything. So I was also thinking about, my cousins and, and my family with this. And like, yeah, so it just like kind of really almost like in my heart gave me that permission to start this work. And so I'm just going to go back to my slides really quickly to kind of just show you what I've been working on from that. Okay. So quickly, this is like this is the camp that we did with Grace Fratt. I'm obsessed, like, in the video, she's talking about the leg bones. And that's like something I'm absolutely obsessed with, is like processing moose legs, deer legs, but mostly moose legs because they're the strongest and they make the best tools. And then this is very much our makeshift sort of like, there's a hot plate that's connected to like an extension wire and all of these sort of things. But, this would have been maybe done over a fire and things like that. But this is very urban, and it's very important that this is happening in the city, because in the video, she talks about being on the farm, on the land, doing this work. And, a lot of us do not have access to that. And that was part of like some of my research talks about that, about us having the access to things. But as any research sort of goes, it's definitely changed over time of what I originally wanted to do. So, my working proposal was called It Smells So Good, which is talking about indigiqueer sort of like high tanning revival and what that means for queer Indigenous folks having access to culture. But I really was like, as a visual artist, I need to push this idea further. So I'm just going to go over some of these. So these are kind of like some of the visuals that I was like kind of thinking about and starting. So I've been thinking about the visuals that come out of, Hide Camp, and talking about those stories about, honoring. So I did this in a class with Hannah when I was doing my coursework, because Hannah and Michelle are two of my amazing advisors. And I was really thinking about the visuals and like what that kind of like looks like, especially from a two-spirit perspective. And, also really inspired by Ayanna Miracle, and thinking about the ways in which she wrote this text, A Journey in Gender, and the way that she writes about it, which is very much pushing back against like the way in which we share our knowledge and sort of like what is considered academic or not. But yet she still kind of answers all of those questions and does it in such a brilliant way that you're almost like, oh, you said you weren't doing this stuff, but actually you're doing it, and you're doing it better, like how you describe it. So I was really thinking about that, especially from a visual art perspective, and I know when you're watching the video, you guys can probably see it too. There's like these kind of glitches that are happening. And I noticed in a lot of my new work, a lot of the images that I'm dealing with have become corrupted and things like that. But something about that also is very interesting to me. So, those colors, these sort of fluorescent colors coming through, showing the ways in which image and video is almost breaking down, but it's really the voice that is the most important. At the end of the day, the orality, the sharing of those stories is still existing. And so doesn't, for me, kind of that breakdown of the technology is very much just like part of the course of, because breaking down, like, especially if you're thinking about hide tanning, it's really natural. The slow processes of that, the little bugs that often help us, with those processes too. So really how the land really also helps in that process. And really, as maybe when we think about hide tanning, we think about nuisance, we think about the smell, we think about the bugs, but those are all really important key aspects. And so this is like a photo of some tobacco that I grew from when Ceasewise did an Indigenous garden for, I think it was the Momenta Biennale. So it's a very much a photo lens-based sort of like, how do I say, like not like, it's just like an art thing. Wow, very, very academic art things, And so I remember visiting this garden and seeing all the different tobacco plants, because I mostly grew like Virginia, sort of like the big tobacco leaves. And these are all part of like what comes into this, which is like sort of building a visual culture of like the moose brain, the moose antlers, the moose legs, bringing in the tobacco plants and turning that all into beadwork, which I'll show right here. So these are kind of like the other images, me like thinking about the ways it's going to look. So you can kind of see this is very much downtown. That's Berry Street, right across from no, where the buses are, not Gare Central, but the bus station. And so this is where they had that garden set up, with all of these plants that are like indigenous to this place, but it was almost like this pop-up garden. So they weren't going to stay there. So there's very much this kind of like limbo in time. You had to be there, which is it is very interesting in terms of like, colonization, how we have access to our plants or don't have access to them, and how art can bring those things. So this is kind of what I started to work on, working with sinew that's been dyed fluorescent colors, working with beads that are also fluorescents, because of also the disruption of the digital, like the digital material. Was very inspired by the fluorescent pinks. And if any of you have seen me recently with all my different hair colors, I'm really big into fluorescence and hair and, those sort of colors. I have this purple hair now, but I just had yellow hair, very complementary colors for all the artists out there, and it just like speaks to the vibrancy, and like maybe these are not natural colors, but this is kind of like that urban take on all of these different designs. And so it really started to make me think about hide tanning and also like desire. And especially because I'm working a lot with like two-spirit people. And a lot of us are I don't want to say all of us because it's generalizations, but we're very much in touch with our sexuality. If we're allowed to actually like, do that, if we're actually allowed to practice and do all those things without the impeding colonial sort of heteronormativity being shoved down our throats unconsensually, because like we can also have things shoved down our throats consensually, but this is unconsensual, okay, and we don't like that. But with that in mind, what I also noticed at these camps is all of the dirty talk and the sexual innuendo and all of those sort of things that came out. And and I really was like, hide tanning, we think about it as like this kind of commercial thing, we're selling these hides, but actually it's a very sexy thing. So I'm also looking at other artists and hide tanners. So I have a couple slides of people that kind of show this point, which is, this is from Cries Over Moose Hides. So Kanina Terry, she's like the ultimate, and it says, if you're not happy single, you won't be happy married. Happiness comes from moose hides, not relationships. And then like, this is a meme that she made of herself, because also Kanina made this, it's called I think it's called the Hide Babes calendar. So this kind of like fundraising effort where people are posing kind of like provocatively with their hides. And this I love. It's like them dress for the job you want. And here's Kanina, like in her gitch, in a vest that she made, this hide, the moose hide that she tanned, and of course to the right, the earring, the necklace collection. Like this is just perfect to me. And just thinking about the ways in which naturally sexuality and that embrace of desire comes through the hide tanning as well. And so then I think about other artists like longtime friend of mine, collaborator, Amy Malbuff, and this is the work that that she did for Indigenous Fashion Weeks, and working with the moose hide. And also, I love the mask reference. As you know, I'm a huge fan of masks. So that plus, the little under boob plus the little pregnant belly. So it's just showing, like, child rearing and how it's sexy, how it's connected to the land, all of those sort of things, and so these are kind of other people that I want to write about to really kind of reinforce what I'm already thinking about. Also people like Catherine Blackburn, very much because I think this work is called There's No Scar, but then there's this beaded beautiful bruise that's on the hide, that's strapped in. And also when it's documented, it's on the land as well. Like even as I'm talking to you, I'm like, oh yeah, like all of these things tend to be on the land. And then finally, another artist that I really admire, Chelsea Kaya, this, beaded work plus the smoked brain tan hide, which you can tell because of the kind of brown, the golden brown that exists there, but also their beadwork, very much this trickster is coming through, and all of these symbols that are from their community. Everyone is very different. I forget where Chelsea is from, but I know Catherine's Dene, and I know Amy Malbouf is Cree Métis from Lac La Biche, Buffalo Lake Buffalo Lake Métis settlement is where their family is from in there. And so just thinking about these artists and like that are already kind of like doing this work and essentially like trying to also relate it to my own, because I'm going to be making photographs of the people that do this type of work, and also just like kind of how that, like how that's all related. So that's kind of like where I'm at in this research and thinking about it, and also wanting to photograph other people and interview other people. Because I'm an artist, I'm thinking very much of research creation. There needs to be some body of work that comes out of this, because the visuals are so important, and just adding to the repertoire of what's already out there and just like highlighting something to me that seems very obvious. But maybe, somebody hasn't maybe there's others. And hopefully from this, that there becomes something that is actually tangible that you can hold in your hand, like a book or something that is able to go out to community, because this work for me doesn't feel like it needs to stay in the ivory tower. This work very much needs to be out there, for others to see, especially for those in our community who this is for. So whether you like that or not is great, but I know who I'm making this work for. So this is kind of like where I'm between the writing and then the making, and writing about the making, and involving myself, but involving others, because now the voice who has the control over what is said is also in the work. So I'm thinking about myself in that as well. And what does that mean, as a Métis person writing about this and about myself as well? Because ultimately I know, like, if there's anybody that could write about myself, it's probably myself, and so just taking that, not taking, but just the knowledge that has been gifted to me, and how do I gift it back to the community? Because right now, it feels very, as a PhD, it feels very individual. And so that is also another part of like what I'm thinking about. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Dayna. Again, thinking about, these processes and actually bringing them back to community, and, from your own positionality of creating this research and this work, and how important that is. And I just want to now kind of turn over to Victoria to talk about her practice and basically the research that you're working on right now.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you both. Very interesting, and gets me all tingly. So yeah, I just want to talk about, I began my PhD journey with a project focused on increasing Indigenous representation in dance. As I said, I've been a professional dancer and choreographer for far too many decades, 30 years living in Canada and Europe. I'm a mother of a 14-year-old daughter and a Red River Métis citizen. And I felt the strong need, because I don't reside out west, to be able to give back to the community here, Indigenous community, through my research creation. My goal was to investigate how to improve accessibility for Indigenous youth in the performing arts, addressing historical and present underrepresentation in our field. However, as I mentioned, I had the opportunity and the momentum from my dance circle to begin building a dance program that I named Watershed. So my research shifted from investigating this topic here at Concordia to building it with the urban Indigenous community and arts organizations, including Native Montreal, Anawara Dance Theatre, Makahatine, and Montreal's Urban Indigenous Network. Later, I'll be reading a manifesto that I wrote prior to the beginnings of Watershed. And this manifesto was first shared in May 2023 at the Festival Transamérique, and I feel like it was set in motion. So I'll be sharing this and other photos from my recent dance camp and performance at the Seagull Center in Montreal. So Watershed really embraces a holistic approach. It's rooted in community, the urban community, and guided by youth. It's about offering what I know and seeing how it resonates with them, ensuring it's truly in by and for the community. This undertaking was really rooted in conversations that I've had over a period of some years, and the manifesto, Dancefesto, was born out of a need to inspire change and growth in our dance communities, to imagine the unimaginable. I set my manifesto between challenging but doable and likely impossible, but it was inspired by an exercise we did in Dr. Heather Iglo-Liorte's art history class, who we miss terribly, where we were to find solutions to decolonize institutions that were 1, easy, 2, challenging but doable, and 3, likely impossible, but let's explore it anyways. So I look to the Michif word for Métis values, which is Kaya Ka Ishi Pima Tichiak, through the Red River Wheel teachings in the Giving Trees story. I know this teaching story through both oral and written versions. This is from a book that was beautifully illustrated by Michif artist Lee Dorian and elder Michif speaker Norman Fleury, who translated keywords, well, actually the whole story into Michif. My manifesto, or the manifesto, Dancefesto, is a living document that is incomplete at best and doesn't represent all Indigenous peoples' experiences in the past, present, or future. However, it's a tiny echo of the conversations I've been having amongst my Indigenous dance circle. And it's a glimpse of where we can head and ideas to inspire and engage. It's a call to action. And the conversations were mainly with 3 other Indigenous dance artists, Barbara Ganaratuni Daibo, a Mohawk Ganingehaga woman from Ganawage, Ivani Obemalo, a Wolastoqey dancer here from Quebec, and Simic Komak Tsikak, a Two-Spirit Inuk dancer from Rankin Inlet. Just a trigger warning, in the manifesto I do mention residential schools and other ongoing genocide and its effects that have happened here in Canada, so-called Canada. The title is Reaching to the Sky from Our Deep Roots, Nashkopishkun, which is the Michif word for little elder. To our future trees, our giving trees, let us reach to the sky from our deep roots. Move through the noise, the apathy, and the doubt. Dance, sing, bead, carve, weave. Write and tell our stories through these dances, songs, and through our belongings of those past, present, and to come. The stories and memories activated through our art by remembering who we are and where we come from. We decide now how, when, and why, not the government or settlers. We must seize this opportunity to speak for those who passed on and didn't get to speak because of the Indian Act, the potlatch ban, the schools, forced adoptions, the clearing of the plains, missing murdered Indigenous women, girls in Two-Spirit, the Starlight Tours, forced sterilizations, epidemics, relocations, and much more. And all the past that our ancestors survived to honor those seeds with kish chitaitemik, respect. It is our duty to persevere by drawing on the courage that we possess to create and tanjkin kayen, to share our knowledge for ourselves, for each other, and for the world. Let us find in each other and see ourselves in Geoge Win at the kitchen table with Sherry Farrell-Wissett and Kathy Meadows, of course, and our other aunties and Tian Vanek. Let us see ourselves on stage in Liqueur, an all-Métis opera about Louis Riel, or in The Five Moons, who were the 5 Indigenous Oklahoma ballerinas, or with our grandmothers in the belongings with their stories intact at the museums and galleries. Let us see each other in Wani Corn Miller in the Olympics, on television with Reservation Dogs and Little Bird, or Rosanna Deerchild on the radio, and Alanis Obamsawin in the cinemas, represented as we choose to be. Let us be part of Tashkini Kayen, the sharing of our stories, to share how, when we want, not as materiality to be watered down and consumed, but bright, full seeds to plant with shaki hikwayak, with love, for those that come after. It is the artist's duty to inspire a future beyond the space we currently inhabit. We must take this duty with courage, because it's never an easy thing to create something new that's never been made before. It's like a birth, and sometimes a difficult one. We must find la force, the strength to give birth to these ideas, stories, feelings that have never been told this way, and feel supported. We have infinite stories, so we must find the balance, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually to do the work. So I say rest, breathe, and exhale. Clear your minds of any lingering doubt. Do seeds ever worry they are enough? We carry in our bundles what we need to dance, sing, bead, carve, weave, and write our stories for those seeds that were not allowed to grow due to the past system, the white paper, the reign of terror, Oka. Make it uncomfortable and speak even if your voice shakes, and speak the truth in a way that shines a light on our peoples, our truths, our beauty, and make it shine so brightly and so clearly that the king or queen must turn around and walk out, unable to be in the room that, quote, closed the door on historical amnesia, said Ganengehaga dancer Santi Smith. May every resource that exists in this country to support arts come our way. It is our time to ask and to insist on, as Tanya Lucan Linklater wrote, being the poet and the poetry simultaneously. Write your grant, know your worth, and then ask for double. The uniqueness and untold stories that need to emerge finally. May every non-Indigenous person come to hear this call to action and petition every arts dollar set aside to come our way, as we are still catching up from generations of underfunding, no funding, and outright bans on our cultural expression. Let every settler see our value, and instead of consumption, finds the kwayesh chi totamik, the honesty, the humanity, and their duty to fight for us, and then to give it back, and then to find their place in the circle. In Kiti Me Mikawik, kindness, we ask for our art back, our land back, and our dances back. A Dancefesto. We call for an Indigenous dance pedagogy to be created by and for Indigenous dancers with nation-specific offerings of dances, both social, traditional, and what it means to be contemporary. A First Nations, Métis, and Inuit dance technique that develops the individual within their culture to shine a light on their gifts. There are 100 fancy changes in the Red River Métis jig, powwow steps like fancy shawl, men's traditional, smoke dance, chicken dance, social dances, Métis square dance. We imagine a space where youth can learn their heritage full-time through dance, and we can create new protocols between nations through a dance conversation and language. We imagine a contemporary dance fusion that could be realized by the marriage of any and all of these dances and presented to contemporary dance audiences through an Indigenous and/or nation-specific lens. The results will blow our minds. We imagine developing the imagination and talents of our youth that want to be the next generation sound, lighting, video, and set designers. We imagine a contemporary dance style, for example, like Graham or Limon dance techniques, but is Indigenous. Having an Indigenous contemporary base with a Northwest style, Haudenosaunee Plains, Métis or Inuit depending on the nation. As Leon Simpson says, we dance our world into a new being, and we imagine there being, like in ballet and contemporary dance, national dance schools in each of the cities that exist. They already exist in Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, Vancouver, and so forth, none of them by or about us. Yet. We imagine the music and art schools that would follow or be with, and those schools existing as well directly in our community so the young ones could go after school and the community could see the shows and the elders could be directly involved. Can we ask of ingérie, tolerance, in letting the top-tier funded arts organizations that established themselves during the potlatch ban give the funding and donations to Indigenous arts? Could we ask for these organizations to start from scratch, like many of us Indigenous artists are? Like the people who've been on this time since land immemorial can start thriving while we pick up the shattered pieces of where the colonial project left us. Let the National Ballet of Canada give their annual funding to a newly minted Indigenous dance company. Let Robert Lepage's theater Le Diamant be given back to the Wendat, Innu, and Wabanaki peoples on whose land it resides. The Banff Center back to the Blackfoot Confederacy. Displaced multiple times across with generational wounds that make hearts sometimes too heavy to carry. May the artists find the courage to plant the seeds to heal those hearts and paiksi, the patience to tend to ni mama la terre, to Mother Earth, that will nourish the giving tree that exists in each person to hold, nurture, and share their gifts. One in every city, in every province and territory and community, however remote, for each of our nations. So the next 7 generations, to open the portal and to dream, let us heal. By decolonizing our minds, said Diane Millian and many others, and dancing our way home, so that our tree branches extend from the sky to the deep roots. Merci les bon Dieu, Creator.
Thank you. Well, I think it's very appropriate that we kind of end our first panel with a manifesto, and also thinking about, in terms of we are all participating in building, this working towards our, these manifestos for our communities, for ourselves, and how the research that is taking place here with our students and how they are contributing to these types of futures for generations to come. So we're running a little bit behind, but do we have a break, or do we have any wiggle room for maybe just ask if there's a question, one question from either the group or... Do you have a question? We have a question here in the front. So here, yeah.
I'll bring a microphone over.
For me, I'm a student at Vanier, and I recently did a project on Dayna Danger, which I am also Two-Spirit. And one of the things is, it's not so much a question, I'm sorry, but it's more of a statement that I really enjoy Two-Spirit work. And for me, as a person with disabilities, I'm constantly almost feeling like I'm having things drawn from me. And I really like how much, one of the things that really stood out for me and has been really helping me with feeling community is the street grass. For me, street grass has been doing everything for me, and seeing a flogger made with the street grass and hide in it. I tried to recreate it at one point. It was really difficult, but yeah, sorry. It's mostly, I guess, I just wanted to talk about how wonderful of an experience it was to discover. And I've been keeping notes on all of your projects, and I find it so wonderful. Like hearing about Brazil, and it's different because hearing of different genders that happen there is wonderful. Having to hear about dance and having met Barbara and having to explore Dayna Danger's work has been wonderful, so thank you.
Thank you. I think we're really, really very fortunate here at Concordia that, that we have this community and that we've been able to attract, researchers such as yourself to here and feel that this is a space where you can kind of explore and ask those questions and think about, your own research. So thank you very much. I want to say, it was great, an opportunity to get caught up on all the research that is taking place amongst these students. I have a connection somehow with each one of these wonderful, beautiful minds, and just how much of a privilege it is to have this opportunity and to have an opportunity and to also thank the Indigenous Research Center for creating this space for us to come together. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining us also online. And please stick with us. We're going to switch over to the next panel, Where the Waters Flow, Networks and Tributaries, in a few moments.